much. I hope you can see my presentation and hear me well. So indeed, everything starts with standards. So this is really the most important element because this allows to really have a competitive offer, which is the key to have costs, to reduce the operating costs. So yesterday we had 35 degrees in Luxembourg. So I think I somehow belong to the seminar today, although that will not last for long periods. So I will share you some insights, thoughts that we have learned in Luxembourg. So Luxembourg has started the journey towards electrification around 10 years ago with hybrid vehicles, then gradually start to switch to electric vehicles. So there are more than 10 brands driving of electric vehicles driving in the city. So it's a very interesting place to visit and to really see which technologies work and which do not work. So the first question that we have asked ourselves is really, what is the purpose really to use taxpayers' money to those newer, more expensive technologies? So of course, the answer is that it's really to minimize the externalities from transportation. So it's noise, pollutants, greenhouse gas emissions, and to reduce overall energy efficiency. So each of these externalities has slightly different meaning, but today we know that battery electric vehicles are the one and only the best solution really to address them. However, there's a quick note about emissions, tailpipe emissions, because there is a lot of confusion. So if we talk about the emissions of from tailpipe, then there is a huge improvement which comes with Euro 6 legislation. So this means that the Euro 6 diesel vehicles are already very, very low emission vehicles. So if we only look about these emissions, then switching to diesel Euro 6 vehicles will be already a huge step. So the benefits of electric vehicles are more on the greenhouse gas emissions and the noise. And when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions, there's also a misconception, but we always have to speak about not just what happens in the vehicle, because then of course with electric vehicles, this is zero, but this is not the true or not the entire story. So we have to see how the energy is being produced. So this is why we have to have the well-to-wheel approach. And this is really the true impact when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. And here you can see a comparison to a diesel vehicle of the emissions of different technologies. And the diesel vehicle, this is our reference 100%. So we can see that CNG vehicles, they are even worse than diesel vehicles. With full hybrid vehicles, we can have around 25% reduction on the average. And only the battery electric vehicles can significantly reduce the emissions using the existing energy from the grid. And the amount of which you can reduce the emissions, of course, depends how clean is the energy. So as our previous speakers mentioned, it's a journey. And if, for instance, if the energy is very, very dirty, so if we take, for instance, one of the European countries which has 700 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, then the benefits of electrification are relatively low. It's around 22% reduction. So it's quite similar level to a hybrid vehicle, which still doesn't mean that electric is bad, but simply means we are not exploring the full benefits. However, of course, the average carbon intensity is much lower than that. So this slide shows the kind of journey in the European Union. So you can see here how over the years the carbon intensity of the electricity has been reducing. So today we are around 230 grams of kilowatt hour per kilometer. So this in the end can be translated to 75% reduction versus a diesel vehicle. So now a few words about the energy efficiency, because we had in the past, in the previous presentations, that it's very important to conserve energy. So this slide shows somehow what happens with different energies that we're using in the world. So in fact, on the left side, we see all different sources of energy. And on the right side, we see that all the journey that energy goes through the economy, only 1/3 of the energy is being reused and 2/3 of the energy are being wasted. So this means that we have really to, in our path to decarbonization, we have to start to use technologies which are more energy efficient. So if we, for instance, focus on transportation, we can see that today, majority of the energy is being wasted because of low efficiency of technologies. And battery electric vehicles are really those which are significantly improving energy efficiency. Now, there is a lot of debate whether it's battery electric or fuel cell electric. And this is again where the question of energy efficiency is a key factor. So if we compare the efficiency of fuel cell electric vehicles and the battery electric vehicles, we see there is a huge difference on the amount of energy that we would need to push to the vehicle from the grid to run the same vehicle. So for instance, this would be a kind of amount of energy that we would need to have to run a bus in Luxembourg for 1 day. So for battery electric, we would need to have around below 400 kilowatt hour of energy, and for fuel cell electric, this would be more than 1,000. And today we know that electricity is a scarce resource, and moreover, renewable energy is very, very limited. So this means that we cannot really afford to lose so much energy today. In the future, it will be different because over the time we'll have more and more energy surplus. So we will be able to produce green hydrogen that will make sense, but this is really, really far in the future. And of course, the question is that maybe this green hydrogen will not be used for transportation, because in transportation, especially in the cities, we will have good alternatives, but it will be more used in industries we do not have alternatives, so like steel or cement. So going back to deployment. So in the end, having 1, 2, 3 electric buses, it's easy thing. So Luxembourg has started with very few vehicles, but when it starts to be challenging is when we have to integrate the whole fleet. So this is where we have to look at the full cost model and all the question marks that appear. So when do we want to charge, and how often, and how the charging infrastructure is going to look like. So in here, we see an example of more than 100 articulated electric vehicles delivered in Sweden. So to integrate this into the network is really, really a challenging task and requires a lot of competence to do it in a cost-efficient way. So today in the buses, as previous speakers mentioned, it's a combination between depot charging, so CCS2, and opportunity charging stations. So in Europe, we see that many operators try to really go for depot charging, but I believe that this is really not the best solution today, and not even in the future. So it's always good to have certain infrastructure distributed in the city for many reasons, and I will show you why in the next slides. So one of the challenging elements of electric vehicles is that there is quite significant variability of energy consumption in the function of the temperature. And when it comes to the cost of driving, electric vehicles are very, very efficient. So the cost of driving, you can see, is below 1 kilowatt hour of energy per kilometer. So it's less than 10 liters equivalent per 100 kilometers. So this is very, very low. So these vehicles are very, very energy efficient. And because they are so energy efficient, we then really immediately see the cost of climate and the cost of heating. We didn't see the diesel vehicles because this cost was well hidden in the expensive cost of driving the vehicle. But now with very efficient electric vehicles, this electric cost of heating or cooling is very, very pronounced. And when it becomes really evident is when we are going to high temperatures or low temperatures. This is, so for instance, with 35 degrees outside temperature, the cost can really practically double of the optimal cost when we drive around 15, 20 degrees. And this is also where we see the difference between high and low commercial speed. So this cost will be very, very evident when with very low operation speed, like for instance, with 10 kilometers per hour. And this is why I think it's also very important to these BRT systems. They provide extra hidden benefits. So because of the higher commercial speed, the cost of cooling will be much less visible on the daily operations. So that's also a very, very important element of BRT systems. So because of this variability, there are a lot of question marks how to make the best optimal choice to integrate those vehicles. So for instance, if we would like to take a case of electric vehicle that drives 250 kilometers per day, in most cases, our energy consumption would be less than 300 kilowatt hour per day. But of course, sometimes it could be very hot, very cold, and this can be double. And so the philosophical question is, do we want to go for the highest battery capacity that will be ready for all the worst cases, or we want to have the capacity which is somehow scaled for majority of cases, consumption cases, but just to add opportunity charging. So Luxembourg has decided to go for solution 2 because it's more cost effective, it's more robust and scalable. But of course, it depends on many, many situations. The advantage of the first solution is convenience, but somehow convenience sometimes has a hidden price. So now there has been a question about the range of the vehicles. Where are we? So this slide shows you how the average range of electric vehicles has been increasing. So The first electric vehicles in Luxembourg, they were delivered around 2017, and they had a range less than 100 kilometers. So you had to charge them quite often. So this was very, very complex to integrate them to operations. Now, the vehicles today on the market, their range is on average 250 kilometers. However, this assumes that we are taking the average consumption of 1.2 kilowatt hour of energy per kilometer. Of course, if it increases with very, very hot temperature, then this our 250 kilometers goes down to even to 150, 100. So we have to keep in mind that average values are not the best representative. However, we know that in the next years to come, the range the capacity is going to increase. So we will have on the market, we'll see the buses which will be able to run the full day of operations without extra charge. Yeah. Nevertheless, it still doesn't mean that we don't want to have opportunity charging station, because then for the robustness and for cost efficiency when it comes to energy, this is really, really important alternative. So I think one of the important elements that in the electrification process, the power sector is really, really important one. So I think this is a very key player in discussing the electrification process, because the power sector will be able to tell about the electricity pricing structure, about the availability of power in certain areas. So that's very, very important. And last but not least, today we have to keep in mind that majority of commercial offer of electric vehicles works very, very well until around 35 degrees. Beyond that, it becomes quite challenging. So I think it will take 2, 3, 4 years before there is a very strong commercial competitive offer in these difficult conditions. Last but not least, we have to keep in mind that the electric or clean bus is just one of the many elements of the puzzle of sustainability. This allows us to make direct reductions of the emissions. And however, we have to keep in mind that the main path to reduce emissions is by making public transport more attractive. So in fact, having an electric vehicle stuck in traffic, it's not an alternative, or it's not any attractive alternative to passengers. We have to keep in mind it's not just about the bus, it's about the whole system. So the priority bus lanes, the BRT system. So this only combined effect of all these technologies can really achieve the total reduction of emissions. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, feel free